Hey everybody, making this video real quick since I'm going to be absent and I was not planning on it. So in the video, I'm going to go through real quick how we decide which solving method we're going to use for quadratic equations. So we've got three options. We've got our square rooting, our factoring, and our quadratic formula. So I want you to go in this order. I always want you to check for square rooting first. These are the really easy ones to recognize. If you're missing the bx term, so remember, I get a pen here. When I'm saying the bx term, I'm talking about, if I have a quadratic in standard form, if I don't have a bx term, automatically you want to solve by square rooting. So always look for that first. Then I want you to take that equation, get everything to one side, and try factoring. If square rooting doesn't work, go to your factoring. Remember, factoring, everything has to be on one side equal to 0 before you can factor. And you're just going to follow your flow chart to see if anything works. And then if nothing factoring works out, then you go to your quadratic formula. That is your last resort. You always want to try square rooting and factoring first, and you only go to quadratic formula when the others fail. So let's look at an example here, right? Going through that kind of thought process. So right away, looking at my equation, I notice that there is an x term. So I know square rooting is off the table. That is not an option for us. So then I'm going to try factoring. So I know with factoring, I have to get everything to one side. So I'm going to add my 2 over. And then if I were factoring and using my flow chart, I'd look for a GCF, which in this case is a 1. And then I would be like, oh, okay, there's 3 terms. My leading coefficient is a 6. So this is one where I would have to turn it into a grouping problem. So then I would try to figure out, okay, what multiplies to 12? Remember, it's the first times the last number, and add to -1. The problem is, nothing works. Nothing multiplies to 12 and adds to -1. So this means that factoring also is not going to be an option for us. The only way that we can actually solve this equation is with our quadratic formula. So let me start over here. Can't square root, can't factor. So let me scratch these out. Quadratic formula. So I'm going to rewrite this. I still have to get everything to one side. Remember, a is in front of x squared, b is in front of x, and our c is at the end. So I'm just going to get this stuff plugged into my quadratic formula and simplify. So negative b plus or minus. Remember, put your numbers in parentheses as you plug them in. Oop, that's not a 6. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is a minus 4 times 6 times 2. Sorry, I can't write on my computer very well. And then we're dividing that by 2 times a. So now if I'm simplifying, I get a 1 plus or minus the square root. Let's see, inside here, we get a 1 minus a 48. Right? -4 times 8 times 2, that'd be a minus 48. So 1 minus 48 is going to give us a -47 inside. And then from here, remember, if we're square rooting a negative, we're going to bring an I out. So we get 1 plus or minus I, square root of 47 all over 12. There's nothing we can do to simplify that square root of 47. There's no reducing I can do with my fraction. So this is our final solution here, okay? So it doesn't look pretty, but that's okay. That's as simplified as we can get. That's our final answer. We have 2 imaginary solutions to the equation. Okay, so that's our first example. But again, going through that process of let's try the square rooting, let's try the factoring, and if nothing else works, then we can do our quadratic formula. Okay, so here's our next one. Okay, right away, I say I have an x squared and I have a constant. There is no x term anywhere, which means I'm going to do my square rooting method. And these are the really quick ones. Because remember, with square rooting, our goal is to just get x squared by itself. So I'm actually just going to start by dividing each side by 4. So I get x squared equals 2. I square root each side. I get x equals plus or minus, right? Anytime you use the square rooting method. Square root of 2 doesn't break down. So this is actually simplified, and that's it. That's our final answer here. Okay. So again, look for the square rooting first, because if you can solve by square rooting, it is going to be the quickest, easiest solving method. Okay. And then last example here. Right away, since we have an x term, I know that square rooting is not going to work. So let's try factoring. Let's see if factoring works out. With factoring, we have to get everything to one side equal to 0. So I'm going to add my 6x over. If we're looking at our flow chart, the next step would be to factor out a GCF, which in this case is a -3. When I go back and divide all of my original terms by -3, I get this. And then if I'm looking inside here, I'm going to try my x method, right? What multiplies to -8 and adds to -2, be a -4 and a +2. So now I can factor, right? I still have my GCF out front, but then this is going to factor into x minus 4 times x plus 2. And then remember, with factoring, we take each of our factors, set them equal to 0, and solve for x. So if I set x minus 4 equal to 0 and solve, I just get x equals 4. And if I set x plus 2 equal to 0 and solve, I get x equals -2. And then I can write that as a solution set. And there it is. So again, right, we already know how to do each of these solving methods. The tricky part is, how do we now decide which method to use? If I don't specifically tell you to solve by factoring or solve by square rooting, whatever it might be, what is that actual thought process? What thinking do you have to do to decide which method is going to work out best? So always check for your square rooting. If that doesn't work, try your factoring, use a flow chart. If you can't factor, it's still not working out, then that tells you that, okay, you've got to use the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula will always work. It's just not always the easiest or the fastest method. I hope this helps. Practice today in class. We will have more practice over this tomorrow as well. So make sure you have questions ready to go. See you guys later.